Well, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let me introduce myself. My name is Razil Fauzan, and then today I would like to explain to you about summarize of the material from the history of English literature. And the first material I would like to explain to you is Old English era, and then the second one is Medieval era, and then third one is Renaissance era, and then the fourth one it is Revolution or Restoration era. Okay, then we move to the materials. Well, about the definition of Old English era, Old English era itself is also called Anglo-Saxon, or in the era that Old English language is exist, and then language spoken and written in England before 100,000. It is the ancestor of a Middle English and Modern English. Scholars place Old English in the Anglo-Frisian group of West Germanic language, and then four dialects of the Old English language are known: North Northumbrian in the northern England, and then southern Scotland, Mercian in the central England, Kentish in south uh, eastern England, and the West Saxon is southern and southwestern England. Well, now I would like to explain you about the characteristic of Old English. It is uh, there is has main basic of characteristic in that era, uh, such as pronunciations, vocabulary, and grammar. And then pronunciation itself is the main character of English language, Old English language. It is pronunciation which completely different from the pronunciation in modern English. This is differences is only because of modification of long vowels. And then the second one is vocabulary. The vocabulary in Old English is completely different from the vocabulary of modern English. Its all vocabulary was completely Germanic. It had some word of Celtic origin too. The research on this language has provided that 85% of that vocabulary has been extinct now. Very few of words are surviving nowadays. Then the the third one or the last one is grammar in Old English, because the third characteristic it is about the grammar is the most fundamental and distinguishes it from modern English. Is it grammar? It's an inflected language too, not so highly inflected as this classical language such as Sanskrit and Latin and Greek. Old English indicates the relations of word in sentence largely by the means of inflections. The characteristic of literature or the works in that era, and then in that era there uh, has a lot of characteristic about the work. The first one is heroic poem, which is one of the earliest surviving Anglo-Saxon uh, poems, and then the second one religious poems, uh, ecclesi- ecclesiastical history of English people written by Bede, that for the example, and then the third one is personal poems, and then the next one love poems, and then Anglo-Saxon chronicle, and Anglo-Saxon sermons, and the last one is riddles. All of you may also ask what kind of literature did the Anglo-Saxon have, and then Old English prose works include legal writings, medical tracts, religious texts, and translation from Latin into other language. Particularly notable is the Anglo-Saxon chronicle, uh, historical record regarding about the time of King Alfred reign uh, in the 8071 until 8099 and continuing for more than 3 centuries. Now about an example of Anglo-Saxon, you can see in here or here. The title is Beowulf. This is the oldest Old English literature or works. Okay, and then we next to the other material. Well, about medieval era, it is the definition itself is the Middle Age is also known as the medieval era. It was the time between the fall of the Roman Empire and the beginning of the modern world. Medieval life centered around the church. The church held worship services and took care of the sick, poor, elderly, and orphans. Monks and nuns gave their lives to the church. While we move to the characteristic of the era, the medieval era, it's the first one is chivalry or chivalry. It is the deals with knights and their code of honor, which is included being of service, being honest, and helping those less fortunate. The second one is magic. This characteristic is symbolized of that era because this came in many forms, especially in what we would consider today as the supernatural. If you look to the Arthurian legends, Merlin is at the forefront of the story's magic, making people invisible or making himself appear out of thin air. Then the third one or the last one is love. The third characteristics, uh, a knight love for a woman knew no bounds. He would face a dragon or his strongest knight to win the favor of the women he loved or to save her. Well, what about the characteristic of literature in medieval era? The first one is the first characteristic is impersonality. Second one is originality, and then the third one is religion. The fourth one is oral quality. The fifth one is courtly love, and the last one is romances. Well, about the example of medieval era literature, as you can see there or there, this is Pierce Plowman by William Langland. Uh, this is medieval poetry, generally known as the Pierce Plowman. That I say the first one, and allegorical work with a complex variety of religious themes. This is one of the major achievements of Pierce Plowman is that it translates the language and conception of cloister into symbol and image that could be understood by the layman. Well, I would like to explain to you about the Renaissance era is a profound period of European cultural, artistic, political, and economic rebirth following the Middle Age, generally described as taking place from the 14th century to the 17th century. The Renaissance promoted the by discovery of classical philosophy, literature, and art. Some of the greatest thinkers or author statesmen that uh, uh, scientists and artists in human history thrives during this era, while global explorations open up new lands and culture to European commerce. The Renaissance is credited with the bridging the gap between the Middle Age and modern. And we move to the characteristic of this era, of this period. The first one is expand uh, sense of possibility. The second one is consonance with the values and doctrines of the church. And then the third one is intellectual and cultural potentialities. The next one is revitalized interest in a classical Greek and Roman. The last one is highbrow existence. And then next one is characteristic of the work in that era. There are several characteristics. The first one is reform in the institutions. Is in earlier times, literature was dominated by the spirit of religion and blind faith. Then next one is dominance of reason, because in the Renaissance age it was the reason instead of the religion that governed human behavior. And the next one is man-centered society. Uh, and the next one is development of science and era of renowned names. And then the last one is counter reformations. And then this is the example of Renaissance literature called King Lear. If you know that literature or works, this is the masterpiece by William Shakespeare called King Lear, the King Lear. This is often considered one of the greatest work of Shakespeare's. Well, now we move to the next material about Restoration era. This is the period of 1619 to the 17th. Is known as the Restoration period or the Trident Age because the monarchy was restored in England. Dryden was a representative of this period. Restoration of King Charles II, the year of 16th and 19 was marked the beginning of a new era in the life and literature of England. When he was defeated by the French and returned to the England and became a king, the beginning of the Restoration started the process of social transformations. The atmosphere of cheerfulness and happiness, raunchiness, and moral laxity was renewed. The theater were reopened. There was a stern reaction against the morality of the Puritans. The founding of the Royal Society was a milestone in the history of England. Interest in science began to grow in that era. Well, now I would like to explain to you the characteristic of the Restoration age. The first one is social and political conflict, which is in this first characteristic is when Charles II returns, English social, political, and religious principles change. And then the second one is opening of theater. All institutions and academics were closed, and the pure movement that opened up during the restorations. The third one is rise of neo-classicism, which is when the restoration represents a complete break with the past, and Elizabeth romanticism was almost over. With the end of the past, literature gained a new spirit and perspective, and a deeper approach to the topic and style. And then next we move to the other characteristic is realism, which is Restoration literature is realistic. It was about life, fashions, and moral. And next is neo-literary forms in that era because the author of that age opposite the romantic ideals of the Elizabeth era, and sought to give a realistic picture of the corrupt court and society. And then next is the revolutions. And the Charles brother to James ascended the throne in 1685. It soon lost its popularity. And then the last one, imitation of the ancients. And then next we move to the characteristic of the work at that era. The first one is realism and formalism. Next is imitation of the French masters, and then the third one is rise of neoclassicism, and then the fourth one is imitation of the ancient master, and then the last one is correctness and appropriateness. Well, thank you for your attention watching my video, because maybe that I has mistaken because misspelling word or something that I said wrong. Please forgive me. And then after you watching this video, I hope you that get new knowledge accepting the material that I explained. And thank you for attention, and thank you so much.